units have started. Solid rocket motor nozzle gimbal checks are underway. Ignition system is armed. T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
You're listening to the Survive to Thrive radio network. Survive, the number 2, thrive.net. Thank you for your attention. The following broadcast is brought to you by the good people at enerfood.com. That's ENERFOOD.com. This broadcast is not intended to be used as medical advice. The FDA, the WHO, the WTO, and the U.S. federal government has prohibited us from making certain claims and truths. You are now locked into Total Health Freedom with Darren Craddock, a twice-weekly analysis of news and information designed to help you achieve optimum health and expose the international tyranny keeping us sick and more easily controlled by the powers that be. Darren has traveled the world, learned from masters, and believes in you. Now, here he is, the man with the plan, Darren Craddock.
This is Darren Craddock with Total Health Freedom, and my good buddy Steve St Clair is back with me this evening, so we can host.
I am.
Yes, he is, and we've got a lot to talk to you guys about this evening. We also have a guest, Chris Duane, coming on in just a moment. And wow, there is a lot going on. Riots in the UK. The Dow is plunging like a paperweight thrown into a swimming pool of debt.
Over 10% in the past 4 working days.
Right, and then if you look at basically finances around the world today, the Dow dropped again based on reports out of France, not confirmed but suspected reports that the French economy is not as strong as it seems to be telling people it really is, which of course, you know, we all know it's a bunch of smoke and mirrors. And basically, gosh, gold tells the story, up beyond $1,800 today. Unbelievable, right?
Oh, yeah, 1814 is trading out right now. Gold, silver's about 39. Unbelievable. I think our guest can comment a little bit on that. Chris, you there?
Hi, Chris, you there?
I am.
So what do you think about everything falling apart here financially?
We're in the beginning stages of the major switch out of all paper assets into tangible assets, and it's one that's going to continue to go on and become more violent as it goes through this process.
Yeah, it seems that way, doesn't it? And you know, we've been talking about it on many alternative media sites for quite some time now, and it's really playing out, which I think many people have been ridiculing us all for the last several years in mainstream media, but it's all coming home to roost.
Absolutely, and it's starting to become more obvious just with the gold trade. So far too often people look at the DXY, the dollar index compared to other fiat currencies, and while that's been going down quite considerably over time, the true measure of all fiat currencies is relative to gold, and gold is going up because it is a international reserve currency, and it's beating every single other currency out there except for maybe the Swiss franc. But at some point, that's going to capitulate to gold too.
Oh, absolutely. What do you think, Chris? I follow a guy, Jim Sinclair, and you know what he's saying is a virtual reserve currency is coming. You will not be able to own or trade that virtual reserve currency as you have been able with the dollar. Gold will be attached to that virtual reserve currency via a broad measure of world liquidity. Of course, there's a lot of things, you know. What's the measure of liquidity? And he thinks it's going to be kind of like an M3 thing that was in the past that they discontinued, right, for the dollar.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, Jim St Clair had a really good interview with James Turk today of Gold Money, and in that, probably the most prevalent quote, and I put it on my blog, which is don't-tread-on.me. It basically said that when you buy gold, you become your own central bank, and that's the most powerful thought right there. Is that you don't need to be held hostage to the whims of nations and central banks. Get out of all paper assets right now, and I'm talking not just stocks and bonds. I'm talking about real estate, pensions, Social Security, retirement, insurance policies. Anything that is a paper asset has counterparty risk, and in a world where we're going to see currency collapses, all paper assets are going to fail. They're going to go down to zero. And that the world is going to seek to have real tangible value, and gold and silver are perhaps the best assets to have in that.
Along with food as well, of course, because gold and silver look pretty beautiful and they're very tangible currency-wise, but you can't eat them, so it needs to be balanced out there between.
You're absolutely,
and I think you're absolutely right. There's a lot of real estate assets that won't be worth spit, but the only thing that's going to be worth things are places that are sustainable in nature, I guess you could call it, self-contained, self-reliant development. They're communities where you can grow your own food, have your own power, water supply, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
Those will actually be worth more than anything else.
Absolutely. And I mean, that's partially why, we've been encouraging people for a long, long time to start off by planting a garden. Consider your backyard, suburban lot, not your backyard only, but your front yard. And if everyone on your street digs up their grass and starts planting vegetables and fruit trees, the city can't come along and give you too much hassle if everyone does it together. Just organize a block party. And, if you've got neighborhood restrictions in your area, the entire neighborhood goes against the restrictions. Well, the restrictions are bunk, basically. And we all should be able to grow our own food. We all should learn to grow our own food. And whatever you're really good at, you can trade with your neighbors and vice versa.
Civil disobedience is called for.
Yeah, that's true. And actually, this is the first year that I actually started growing a garden. I got 4 raised beds that we just started this year. And I tell you what, I mean, you put good dirt in there and water it. It's kind of easy doing it. And I was kind of intimidated because I always thought I had a brown thumb. But if you give these plants the right conditions, they'll thrive.
Exactly. And it depends on where you are, of course. Like in Texas right now, we're under a really bad drought. So you've got to mulch heavily, and you've got to make sure you remember to water every day. And even then, it can still survive. And really hot climates like this, and from subtropical down to tropical, a lot of people give up on their gardens. But a simple act of using shade cloth to shade out the heat of the sun, something that can be rolled back in the less hot months, can make even the parched lands of Texas work for you.
Yeah. Hey, Chris.
Yes, sir.
One of the guys that that everyone listens to, I guess, I mean, a lot of people, is Gerald Salente, and his best quote is, in his experience, when people have nothing to lose, they tend to lose it, right?
Yeah.
And how do you feel about that? And do you see any of what I call the breakdown in societal norms happening in conjunction with this whole breakdown in the economy? I mean, it seems we're seeing escalations in the deterioration of both things at the same time.
Yeah, we have, one of the things I wrote about recently is that we're starting to see all over the world. I mean, we're seeing distress, and it's coming out with riots and protests. Israel had 250,000 people protest on Rothschild Boulevard in I think Tel Aviv. London obviously has been the last 4 nights have been raging with protests, or riots, I should say. And conspicuously, it's not apparent in the United States. And I wrote an article today basically saying that 5 reasons why American riots will be the worst in the world. So even though the United States has been relatively quiet, I really believe the United States has the potential of being a powder keg here. And I list 5 reasons why I think that the United States is going to be much worse than any other global riots. And I basically come back down to that, number one, Americans have been, for lack of a better word, been arrogant. I mean, if you look at our foreign policy, what we have done, I mean, for the last, 60 to 100 years, I mean, when you say we're number one, everybody immediately always thinks we're American, and our foreign policy, our economic policy, our trade policy has always been American dominated, and with the mathematical inevitable collapse of the dollar, we're not going to be able to do that anymore. And now you have generations of Americans who believe that they're either intellectually, morally, politically, militarily superior to every other race on the earth. They're going to face a very harsh reality of what reality is about when we are no longer able to print the world's reserve currency and consume 25% of the world's oil. And it's not just going to be a, shut it off and that's what it's going to be. These people are not going to react well to it. And they're going to probably take it out most likely on the weaker people in their own backyards, as opposed to pushing that forward throughout the world.
Chris, do you see it being a backlash in that nature of riots? Do you see the backlash being against those that are weaker than them, or initially against government? Because that's always interesting to see where people's anger is expressed towards. I mean, the UK riots are something I think we probably should talk about a little bit during the show here, because that's a very interesting socio-political and socio-economic phenomenon, because it's not just what's going on right now. There's this whole underlying powder keg that's been existing in the UK for a couple of hundred years, if not more than that. And that's what people here don't know. They don't understand the history necessarily of the UK, that this is not one incident. And the British government tries to promote it and portray it as if it were one unique incident that's just happened. But it's an underlying disdain for government and disdain for the haves and have-nots situation that's basically been perpetuated in the UK for centuries.
Yep. I mean, keep calm and carry on. I mean, that's classic propaganda from the elite to basically tell the underclass to suck it up. I mean that's what they did all throughout World War II, and for the underclass to sacrifice for what they did. And if people really know their history, England was very instrumental in the rise of Hitler. I mean, the English banks funded Hitler and the rise of Hitler, and there was a bond there between the elite, the British elite, and the Hitler regime. To see Prince Harry walking around with swastikas, it's an insult to those people, and it's one that those people will need to come to a face with, that they're living under a monarchy and an elite class that will never see them as equals. As far as America, I think we're going to see two different kinds of revolutions. I think you're going to see revolutions of people who are most desperate and most attached to the system, and that's going to be violent, and that's going to be against each other. This kind of collectivist mentality of people who are on welfare, who cannot support themselves outside of a socialistic system, they are going to riot, they are going to burn, and they are going to attack others. But there's another revolution that's going to go on, and that's from people who are aware and see that things are going on. And that can be represented by the Tea Party, the Freedom Movement, the Truth Movement, people who are just seeking a better life. And I think that's the more dangerous and more permanent revolution for the elite. So while we might see urban riots of people who are just desperate and criminal activities of lower sociopaths that are seeking to take advantage of something, I think the bigger, larger turn is going to be the American awakening of seeing that we don't have to live in a world based on debt and death.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah,
And
it's probably going to be a very painful transition, I would think.
Absolutely.
It's never going to be. These things never come easy. And just to interrupt a little bit, folks, we're talking with Chris Duane, a.k.a. the Silver Shield. He's got a couple of sites, sonsoflibertyacademy.com and don'ttreadonme.com. Is that correct, Chris?
Yeah,
Or
don't-tread-on.me. Don't-tread-on-me.com actually is an advertiser. They do really cool rock and roll T-shirts, but they're actually they actually do the Sons of Liberty Academy T-shirts now, so they're a sponsor. So I don't mind plugging them too.
Yeah, Chris does a lot of good work. He does a lot of research. He's got a great blog that comes out just daily, really, and follows the metal markets a lot, the economy. He is a good guy, folks. One worth checking his website out and listening to.
Thank you very much.
You bet.
Absolutely.
And getting back to this, Chris, it's for me. You know, if people, you know, your statement a little while ago about the arrogance of the American shtick, you know, the American mentality being very arrogant and it manifests in a lot of different ways. You know, the other take on that is brainwashing of America to be something that, you know, it's not. And people, to me, it's almost like some of the conversations I have today, it's as if people are refusing to see reality now.
Yep. Yeah, that's actually number 2 on my list is denial. I wrote
Denial,
in the article, I said,
absolutely.
Yep. I said for those that aren't arrogant, they're in denial to somehow think that they're okay because they're good people. They believe that America will recover and the American dream is still alive. They believe that this is because they lack the ability to either see through the lies or they believe that good people are ruling them and they have the same morals as they do. And, you know, that denial is that, you know, we somehow can spread freedom through war. And I have you know, you can't do that. You can't enforce your will upon other people without having some sort of blowback. You can't do that as a person, and you certainly can't do that as a nation. And that people...
Chris, just, you know, kind of to elaborate on that, don't you think that's the only way that they've been able to convince generation after generation of servicemen and servicewomen to go and put their life on the line in the pursuit of delivering liberty to others, because they believed it on some level.
Yep. And that's the big problem. That's where I would say 95, 98%, 99% of America is. They believe in, you know, American pie and yellow ribbons and our soldiers are fighting for freedom, and they're not. When you look at, you know, how wars are caused and, you know, between false flags events and, you know, even World War II, where, you know, we put Japan, we basically declared war on them when we cut them off with oil, steel, and shipping. I mean, those are acts of war. And, you know, if Japan bombs Pearl Harbor, it's probably because we instigated them. And we're conducting a war against Iran right now. I mean, we've basically surrounded them. We've put economic sanctions on them.
I want to jump in a little bit there just briefly, Chris, because something you said there to a lot of people, maybe even some of our listeners, might be perceived to be sacrilege, to say that we pushed Japan into declaring war on the United States. But what I want to just have people keep their minds open about is that we are fed a specific version of history that leaves out a lot of very crucial and important facts that are very often almost impossible to find in the history books. Because the people who are behind the scenes pulling the strings really do not care about us, the people, at all. We, the people, to them means nothing. We're just a group of people to be exploited, taxed, and, you know, be enslaved, even though we're told that we're free. You know, there's a brainwashing that's been going on for generations and generations, and war is one of the biggest instruments, a rallying call to rally the people behind a common cause, when really a lot of those common causes, probably not all of them, but certainly many of them, were designed to increase the power of certain small global elites.
Yeah, I could probably trace every single major military engagement since the Spanish-American War and the sinking of the USS Maine to some sort of false flag or provocative measure by the Anglo-American elite for the benefit of, you know, increasing the power of the military-industrial complex. to be able to seize natural assets of other lands, and then having the corporate powers go in there and harvest those assets.
Well,
anybody who believes that our American dollar is backed by, gold or some sort of benevolent power needs to look at the history and the power that our military presents.
Well, for me, all of this information, the facts are out there. You can do the research. It takes a lot of time. And unfortunately, we have this thing called TV that allows people to tune in to their latest, star or whatever. That's your number 3 narcissism. People would rather take the drug of choice, which is TV, and you tune in, tune out. That's pretty much it.
And that kind of programming is one that's really hard for people to deal with. I mean, we've been programmed to be narcissistic, unempathetic people, and we're mass producing, psychopaths, people who just lack the ability to relate, emotionalize with other people. We're concerned about our looks and transitory things that mean absolutely nothing to us. One of my favorite clips of all time was when Jesse Ventura was on Hannity and Combs, and the Hannity read a quote that Jesse Ventura wrote that said that all these media figures, no matter how popular they are, they're all controlled, and that they don't really represent anything other than sock puppets. And then Hannity goes, "You're either going to call me a liar or something," and Ventura went right back at him. He said, "You mean to tell me you think covering Anna Nicole Smith for 4.5 months was the most important thing going on when we had wars and deficits?" And Hannity had nothing to say about that.
Zero.
And that's how our media reacts. They'll spend months talking about Michael Jackson, Anna Nicole Smith, and all these low-level celebrity things. Meanwhile, we are literally getting raped every day,
sure.
And no one even talks about what that the Federal Reserve is privately and foreign-owned bank. That to me is by far the most factual and most important fact that is completely missing from the American experience.
Oh well, and then the BIS now
is
a country. It's a country within a country.
Yep, just like the city of London.
Sure. It's incredible to me that people don't realize that these are, and the city of London, most people don't realize that that's pretty much a country within a country. Mm-hmm. Just like the Bank of International Settlements we're talking about is located in Basel, Switzerland, or on the outskirts of, but it's completely surrounded by fence, has its own security force. The government of Switzerland and their folks are not allowed to enter. You just can't get in there unless you're invited.
Yep. And one thing that I'll tell you people, and I cover all of this in the Sons of Liberty Academy, and it's absolutely by far the best resource to learn about all this. Instead of poking around the internet and trying to figure things out, sonsoflibertyacademy.com. It's free. It's 6.5 years worth of my study put into video lessons in the way that I wish I had learned it. One thing that I will tell you that, you can kind of get to the bottom of all this, and it goes right back to the Rothschilds and the Rockefellers, the Bank of International Settlements, Federal Reserve. All that stuff is great, and it's good for you to know. But at the end of the day, the power and the problem is inside of our mind. Because I tell you what, 10,000 elite cannot control 7 billion people without us, controlling ourselves. And the power is not in the Rothschilds, the Rockefellers, Federal Reserve, Bank of International Settlements. It's within us. And if we willingly become ignorant and willingly participate either actively or passively in supporting the dollar system, by being in debt, by not having food, by not having good health, by believing the media, we're our own worst enemies. And it's up to us to become free. It's not an outside thing that we have to go out and protest and do something. It needs to start inside with us.
Exactly. We are sovereign individuals. We are sovereign. And we have either given it up knowingly or unknowingly at some level in too many different ways.
Well, part of it, I think, also is that the vast majority of people don't know what their rights are. And because the issue is, if you don't know what your rights are a lot easier to take away. They're a lot easier to abuse. And so one of the first places to start, I believe, is for people to understand what their rights are and how to stand up for their rights and who to look for to enforce their rights. Because left, right, and center, especially since the Patriot Act, people's rights have been being abused much more than before. But, you know, you look at the Rawson Foods basically raid several days ago. In order to get released on bail, those folks were obliged to give up their First Amendment rights. They cannot talk about the case. You know, that's you know, very, for us, being involved in healthy eating, healthy foods, healthy supplements, that really hits very much home to us, that particular incident. And yet it's happening not just there, it's happening all over.
Yeah, I mean, I can even cut even further down the chain. The problem, you know, like I said, is not only with us, it's also in the way that we're able to process information. If you think about our education system, it's really designed for us to be an input-output slave. We're told to learn facts and then regurgitate them on a piece of paper. And depending on how well we do that, input and output, that's how we get graded, and that's what makes us successful inside the system. And that process of learning is no different than a computer, an automaton, or a slave, where they're given orders and you're able to repeat those orders. You know, I was in the Marine Corps for 7.5 years, and the Marines were very, you know, upfront and blunt about it. They want instant and willing obedience to orders. And that's quite honestly what the state, the corporations, and the military want out of their citizens. So they create an educational process that creates people that only can input and output. A classical education was called the trivium, and it revolved around three basic principles. Being able to observe a situation, so being able to observe a situation, logically thinking about it, and then having the ability to use rhetoric to explain your observations. That three-step process is the exact same process that, you know, any criminal, CSI or anything would do in a criminal case. Well, that process of logically thinking, that there is your freedom. And that, to me, is the most important part. Because as soon as you're able to receive an input, like propaganda, and if you're not able to filter it and logically put it out, and you then start repeating the talking points that the media puts out there, you are a slave, because somebody else is doing the logical thinking for you. But if you're able to receive that information, logically think that, gee, maybe Iran isn't the big evil, and maybe that we've had 60 years of sticking our thumbs in their faces, and that's why they're acting that way. Maybe we shouldn't be sending our boys over to war. That's where freedom is, in that logical thinking, and that's totally devoid in our educational experience.
It absolutely is. I mean, I literally feel like I had to educate my kids myself up until they were in high school. But luckily, they went to a high school that prided itself on logical thinking and really pushed that discussion and all that sort of stuff. And they felt that a lot of their friends who went to other high schools just didn't have much between their ears. They couldn't have conversations with them that went beyond facts. And so that's I can see that. My kids are, my youngest is going to graduate next summer from high school. So that's very fresh for me to see that, basically evidence of that through the childhood of my kids.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's the same thing with me. I mean, I was a very poor student throughout school. I remember at a very early age wondering, how is this necessary for me to succeed, for me to learn these facts? And I got bored and I got frustrated, and I learned to keep my head down and just make it through the day. Well, that's another slave-like thought. Keep calm and carry on. I mean, that's a slave mentality where you just put up with stuff instead of questioning authority and understanding where you belong and knowing your rights and knowing that you're a special individual who has talents and that you can do something better than that.
Well, that's right. But now they have a little thing called ADHD and ADD, so that if you are bored and restless in school, they'll just drug them. That's right. You know, take that creative initiative right out of the system with drugs.
And at the same
Brave
time,
new world right there.
There you go.
Let's get rid of recess at the same time so that energy can't be spent, so that the kids can actually sit down and focus up because they've done some exercise physically. Or change no one wants to change the educational system to cater to kids that have more energy. They only want kids that will just sit there like slaves and obey. Well, that's like we're going to, folks. We'll be back in just a few minutes. With natural and man-made disasters and economic turmoil, if we don't get well prepared, we will most certainly regret it. Good readiness must include storage of high-quality food that will build us up rather than tear us down. Much of the storable food available is full of bad fats, salt, sugar, nutrient-poor refined foods, and even MSG. In response, EnerHealth Botanicals has created our 40-day and 40-night 100% organic preparedness pail. It's GMO-free and has a 10 to 20-year shelf life if stored at 60 degrees or less. Some of the items need cooking, some can be eaten dry, while some can be soaked and sprouted. These are selling out fast at third the price of storable food packages. Call us at 866-762-9238. That's 866-762-9238. Or go to enerfood.com, ENERFOOD.com. 866-762-9238. Or go to ENERFOOD.com.
You're listening to Total Health Freedom with Darren Craddock, sponsored by the good people at enerfood.com. Natural answers for your health, wealth, and well-being. Now, here's Darren Craddock.
And we're back. Darren?
Yeah, we're back.
We're back.
I'm here too.
Yeah. Hey, Chris, I want, this last half, I wanted to, you have some nice links within your last article, which is, I urge everybody to read that article. I think that it's great. And he's got a lot of cross links to articles that he's written before. One of them, the 5 places not to be when the dollar collapses, which I think is just great. I think you have definitely done that justice. And folks, I'm in total agreement with Chris. This is going to be one of the largest events in our history today. As far as economic, standard of living, a new paradigm. You call it what you want right now, but this thing is going to be huge, and it's going to affect us in ways that no one can predict right now.
Yeah. I try to tell people, I mean, to me it's almost insanity that people are just so, either in denial or something, because even if I'm 5% right, the effects of what I'm saying is what I believe is 100% mathematically inevitable. The dollar is going to collapse. We're either going to have an outright default because we cannot pay the interest on the loan, or we're going to have a hyperinflationary depression where we do pay all the dollars out there that are owed, and it's going to make the dollar completely worthless. Either way, the dollar is going to die. And since the dollar is the world's reserve currency, and all paper assets and other currencies revolve around the worth of the dollar, when that collapses, commerce collapses, trades collapses, markets collapse, everything collapses, and everything comes to a grinding halt. Our way of life is a highly intricated, machine that revolves around the dollar. And as soon as that ends, there's no food that's going to be at the store shelves anymore. Fuel's not going to be, transported anymore. Jobs are all of a sudden obsolete because there's no economy. And this is, in my mind, a 100% mathematical fact that this is going to happen. And I wrote that article basically under the premise of when this does happen, here's 5 places that I believe that have benefited the most from the dollar will all of a sudden become the absolute worst places to be when the dollar collapses, because those that rode the highest, as we all know, the housing bubble, tend to fall the fastest and hardest. So if you bought, properties in South Florida during the housing bubble when times were good, you probably lost the most amount of money. Well, the 5 places that I said benefited the most from the dollar, I believe were Israel, Southern California, England, New York City, and Washington. And,
Right.
At the beginning of today, we got riots in England, and we got protests in Israel, and then the United States. We're in deep denial, but I tell you what, when that denial starts hitting reality, we're going to be a lot of very mad people.
Well,
that would be the day I would not want to be a politician in
right,
D.C.
absolutely. The thing is, we're a nation of good-hearted people who've been brainwashed into not acting and allowing our rights to be stripped away from us right from beneath our feet. Many of us, we got an email from one of our good friends and customers just a moment ago, saying that, he was looking at the pail and hoping he can get the money together to get one of the Survive to Thrive preparedness pails, and was looking forward to the great show tonight, and forwarded the information about the show to a lot of people, most of who he thinks are going to enjoy it, but he said there may be some who still can't see the elephant in the living room.
Or the Tyrannosaurus Rex in the living room.
Yeah,
that's pretty much it.
Thanks for that rock, by the way.
Well, you're the 5 places that you don't want to be gives me the segue. Darren and I were down in Costa Rica just recently, and we were actually doing a little fun thing, doing a canopy tour, one of these little zip line things, and just totally relaxing. And we did it in this place in southern Costa Rica that, as it turns out, is a self-contained, sustainable resort community. And Darren and I, we're all into all that stuff. We look at all different kinds of things and ways, and we've seen people with plans and this and that, but they've never gone beyond the plan stage. Mm-hmm. If you don't do some kind of thing, yourself or just your family, then it usually doesn't happen. Because I've tried it before in the real estate business, and banks will not fund anything like that.
No.
They just go, are you kidding me? Why would you want to do that?
Yeah, they just want cookie cutter houses, cookie cutter, 4-bedroom, 2-bath, 2-garage. It has to look exactly the same fascia, depending on the neighborhood, blah, blah, blah.
Totally on the grid, totally unsustainable. On an individual basis, if you're really creative, you can, make a garden, your whole lot a garden, do all kinds of things like that. It's very intensive. It requires a lot of energy by the person that owns it. But the idea of a sustainable and self-contained community is you got a pretty diverse community, but you also have some pretty developed ways of getting food to your table. And this place, they actually are doing permaculture throughout the place. It's 750 acres, only 3% of which is actually going to be homes, are developed roadways, homes, and things like that. The rest of it is primary rainforest and food production.
So one of the key things that's kind of cool about this that we liked, and I've trained in permaculture, actually got my permaculture design certificate 2 years ago, and it's something that I'm very passionate about. I think it's just a great way, a great alternative to restore the earth, to restore our relationship with the earth to one of respect, of nurturing, and creating a situation where we give to the earth gives back to us. So we take care of the earth gives back to us. For example, it would take, for say, the average head of cattle, one cow, it takes about an acre of land. Depending on where you are, if you're in a very mountainous environment, it could be as much as 7 to 8 acres because there's not as much, the land basically gets degraded very quickly. However, if you have 1 acre and you grow the right kind of trees on it and crops on it, you can feed up to 20 head of cattle from 1 acre of land, but you can need to keep those cattle penned in, and you take them walking and what have you, let them out for a little bit. But most of their food supply is given to them in a structured environment. So you're using nature to your advantage. Currently, the model of agriculture, be it big ag, be it, grazing that's going on throughout Africa, for example, is depleting the earth, whether it's, a subsistence farmer or whether it's big ag. But permaculture looks at the situation, observes, thinks, and comes up with solutions that actually benefit both the animals, the humans, and nature, so everything can work together in a synergistic manner. And what they're doing at this place in Costa Rica is they've put in already 3,000 fruit trees. They've put in devices that we call in permaculture berms and swales, which catch the runoff water when there are heavy rains so that you don't get erosion. They've put in plants that prevent erosion. They've put in plants that feed the soil, put more nitrogen back into the soil so you don't have to actually use fertilizers. So it's a whole system that's designed to actually be sustainable, because a truly sustainable system has a very minimum, if any, need for outside inputs. Our current agricultural system requires huge numbers of inputs, and it's completely unsustainable. And so the dollar crashes, the dollar's worth nothing from one day to the next, or 1 week to the next, or 1 month to the next. Farmers aren't going to have the money to buy fertilizers. The mainstream big ag farmers are going to suddenly become interested overnight in subsistence farming methods that hail towards permaculture or look towards permaculture and other sustainable methods of cultivation as the answer to our world's agricultural problems.
Yeah, we have monoculture right now. The area that I am, I'm surrounded by farms, and it's either corn or soy. But you won't find, mixed crops. You won't find, farms that are going fallow to let the soil rejuvenate. And we're gonna have to. This dollar collapse. I don't view this as a fearful thing. Yeah, there's going to be a lot of awful transition, and there is going to be a lot of death. But I think that this is going to be one of the best possibilities for humanity to actually become something higher and better than what we've been for the last 100 or 1,000 years.
Right. That's what I've been preaching myself is, out of this, the ashes is the only way we're going to be able to create a system, a new paradigm, if you will, that brings us to a better place, a higher, functioning consciousness about where we are, who we are, and a more natural development plan than the thing that we're doing now, which is unnatural in so many ways.
It's all about consciously creating your future, working together to build community. And you can build community now. You don't have to wait for the crash. In fact, I advise don't wait for the crash. Start building community now, whether it's through your church, whether it's through neighborhood associations. Learn what are your needs. What are your needs locally? You need food, right? You need to take care of your waste and trash. You need to take care of water. So the simple things, look at what your needs are. And everyone's a little bit different, but we're all very similar at the same time. And if you get together with your church group, whether it be, and if you go to a church where you don't find anybody who's particularly in line with that, people who, can sit in the living room with an elephant in there and don't notice it's there, you may want to choose a different church to go to or a different community to be involved with.
Tons of meetup groups.
They're really meetup groups, and ultimately the key here is people who have their eyes open, because you don't know, but if a crash is going to happen, you don't want to be around a bunch of sheeple.
That's right. Well, and that's one of the things that attracted Darren and I to this place down in southern Costa Rica. It's like plan B, backup plan. If, things get just untenable or we feel like it's going to be untenable, it's a place to punt to. because it is self-contained. 80 or 90% of your food can be delivered within the community. It's 30 minutes to the ocean. You can fish, whatever, and they even have boats out there. This community is developing that. And it's a new community, and they're developing that way. They're self-contained with water. They have several miles of river. They have enough hydro to deliver all the power you need to that place, to every home. There's only going to be 160 homes, and they've already started construction. And it was cheap. I was like astounded of how inexpensive it was, compared to, well, just about anything around that I've seen.
Well, and for what you get, value for money, I mean,
oh, yeah.
You can buy an average home in an average suburban area, going to cost you probably, for a 3 to 4 bedroom house, somewhere between 200 and 300,000, depending on where you are. In some parts of the country, it's going to be between 500 and $1 million for that size house. But you get no fruit trees, no food production, no chickens, no eggs, nothing,
And no like-minded individuals. I think that's the most important part.
Well,
exactly.
We've talked extensively with the people, the group of people that are involved in this development, and there's zero debt. They took no debt on. They bought the land for cash. They're only developing when they sell lots. They escrow the money to make sure, if they hadn't already cut the roads in, to let the customers know that the lots are going to be served with roads and drainage and all that stuff. So it's really great idea these guys have got. I mean, I was like all over this thing. And the developer himself, he just said, we can do anything here. And he said, well, our first impression when we did this was 80% of the people would come here and buy and then rent their houses out and just come down here for vacation, right? He said it's exactly the opposite. 80% of the people that are buying are going to live here full time. Only 20% of the people in the community are going to lease out their house, as a kind of a resort, deal. And he said, we got the best of both worlds. If you still don't see the elephant in the room and you think that everything's going to be hunky-dory, they have all these tourist things going on, this canopy tour and horseback riding and rappelling and this and that, all these things that, tourists come to see it for. And he said, we got cash flow. The residents can participate, create their own businesses, whatever, down here and know that they're going to have people that are coming into the resort. I mean, it was crazy because you had to book ahead. I mean, all their things are always booked, always. So it was cool on that end of it too, but they have great community structures. They have a big community pool and a big community restaurant kind of meeting facility. They're building the structures that allow people the opportunity to create community themselves, because people have to create community. Developers can't do it. They can only create structures and a way of seeing things. We were so excited. I mean, we're buying in. We're in the process of getting ourselves set up down there, because it's just, for us, it was a great option. If that option existed in the States, I'd have to look at that. But so far, I've never seen that. Have you, Chris?
No. In fact, one of the things that I've been, waiting for is for this massive revaluation, because I'm fully invested in physical silver. I sold out. I literally bet the house on silver in 2005. And
good bet.
I have the absolute desire to do something like that in the United States, but at our current prices and valuations, it's not possible. I mean, you would need hundreds of millions of dollars to pull off what these guys are doing down in Costa Rica, and plus the fact that you still have to worry about a rapacious government who you could worry about eminent domain and taxes and regulations and zoning. But the benefit of when the dollar collapses, all those powers and regulations and authorities are going to lose power. And it's going to be at that point where those people who had, saw what was coming, got their assets out, put them into real assets like gold and silver, and, obviously you need food and guns and stuff to get through the transition. But those people that are aware and saw ahead of time, we're developing a huge community of people who get it. And I cannot help but to think that there are going to be communities inside the United States that are going to be, based on freedom and attract the best and brightest minds inside the United States, while, a lot of other cities and territories are going to go down the opposite road towards tyranny. I could see, cities like Chicago and New York and LA, will become more tyrannical as the worse things get.
Yeah.
But,
absolutely.
Somewhere in the Midwest and I'm in Ohio, there's going to be places where it's going to be, land is super cheap. We have a lot of like-minded individuals. We're all of a sudden very wealthy. Why wouldn't we go about building a new community where we could, really respect and live a life that we're meant to live?
Absolutely. In the interim, I'm looking for other options. That's our deal. Is just what are you going to do in the interim? And it's like you said, you can store food. You got, your ammunition and things like that. If you stay and wait it out, which both options are great. I think it's like one or the other. Some people want to do that and can afford the bug out kind of. I'm going to go someplace that's the structure's already there, right? It's a constraint of money, and it's what you can do within those parameters. And for those people that want to consider the Costa Rican deal, there's a banner on our site. You can hit that. It'll take you to a page in the Interfood site that will talk about it, tell you our experiences about it. And at the same time, we're storing food as well. You never know, even with an option like that, did I wait too long?
Yep.
Right.
Am I even going to get there?
Right. Well, people have been telling us for, some years, people are in the know that it would be next year, it would be the year after, it would be the year after that, because it's really hard to say when whatever is going to hit the fan is going to hit the fan, You
guys know what my first article that I published was titled?
What was that?
It was called Doom is Always 6 Months Away.
Yeah.
Because I tell you what, for the 7 years that I've been going down this road, it's always 6 months away. We're always about to collapse.
Right.
I kind of did a tongue-in-cheek thing saying that doom is always 6 months away. But, quite honestly, we're getting to the point where if it's not 6 months away, when is it? We're running into trillion-dollar debts, and, we're now conducting 5 wars. China and Russia are now actively saying, hey, enough is enough. We're seeing riots in Israel and London. We have 45 million people on food stamps and 27 million people on antidepressants. If it's not going to happen soon, when would it happen?
Yeah, Crystal,
Right.
I got the latest figures today on the food stamps. It's actually 1 in 5 Americans now. So, it's actually gone up from that 45
And the worst thing about
million.
the food stamps is the food that they eat. This is just
I know.
garbage food.
Oh, totally.
It's
Well,
garbage.
the irony is a lot of the stored food is that kind of food. A lot of the
That's
storable food that's on the market is just that food. It's amazing to me that people. I'm just amazed the whole time. Why don't they make food stamps to where you can actually buy real food instead of starches, box, processed stuff?
They have adapted it. They have adapted it. Depends on the community. I know I've met people who've been on food stamps. Knock on wood, I haven't had to be in that situation myself, but, my heart goes out to folks that are. Let's face it, a lot of people lose their jobs, and then what other option are you going to have until you find a way of generating income or creating a business that you can generate without any cash so you can start, coming back up again. But basically, the food stamp situation, depending on the community, may allow you to buy fruits and vegetables.
Well,
even if they do, it's not. Yeah, even if they do, it's not really the affordable choice, because if you got 4 kids to feed and a choice between buying, 2 apples or a pound of peanut butter or Jif, what are you going to do? You're going to feed your kids Jif to keep them, fed.
That's true.
That's the point. And you know, because of that, that's why we have diabetes and you know, all these, you know, diseases and stuff that, you know, you're buying cheap food now, but the long-term medical costs are just astronomical. And not only the financial, the emotional pain that you have, you know, parents dying at 60 years old and kids with, you know, mental disorders and stuff like that. That's the kind of world that we've built here, and it's one that fortunately is going to come to an end when this dollar dies.
Right.
That's right.
Well, I think that's interesting you should say that, because fortunately, yes, it's going to be painful, but it's been so unsustainable, this whole situation of short-term mentality, the desire for short-term gain, the desire to grab whatever we can for the short term and not look at long-term consequences. I think that's been a model that many in this country have been living by, and not just this country. I mean, the UK has been taking over that same mentality, as has much of Western Europe, and it's an unsustainable way of going forward. You know, guess why, of course, the US and Western Europe are the countries that are suffering the most economically, because they've been looking at short-term gain rather than long-term planning for a long, long time. Why is China doing so well economically? Well, they've been thinking about this for decades. They planned this whole situation out. You know, they're pretty bright. Everyone in government in China is a PhD, folks. Everyone in government. You cannot have office in government if you don't have a PhD. Well, that goes so far away from the reality of the idiots we have in Congress.
Oh, the Congress is PhD, piled high indeed.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, one thing you got to say about our congressmen, they're certainly rich. I think the average congressman's wealth has gone up 400% since you know, I don't know, 2006 or whatever the statistic that I saw. You know, they're all about themselves, and if you think that your politician even gives a flying thing about you, think again. You know, and in fact, in order to become a leader, you almost have to not care about your people, and that's why you're able to lie and tell all these stories to as many different people as possible. In fact, we almost expect that out of our politicians. We almost expect psychopaths to lead us.
It makes you wonder how Ron Paul kept getting elected all these years.
God bless him. I mean, now we got at least his son in there and his, you know, and he's in there in the Congress. And, you know, people tell me, you know, if Ron gets in, you know, can he turn things around? I said, no, this system is so far gone. In fact, it needs to die. It needs to collapse so massively that we no longer, as a humanity, believe in creating a society based off of spreading debt and death around the world. But I would tell you, he's the one guy I would want to help pick us up and get us through that, you know, anger and depression phase, so we can start, you know, getting back to what makes us great.
Absolutely. I can't agree with you more. Can't agree with you more.
Yeah, right. Absolutely. Because this country is founded on a very unique set of principles. You know, I am a new American citizen. It's only been, you know, a year and a half that I've had my citizenship. And I believe in what this country stands for on paper. And I want it to get back to that. I think it's a very noble vision, and it's something we need to continue to defend. But in this current situation, we've got to all work to make that happen. It's not going to happen with our politicians. It's got to come from us. We've got to get active, but we need to be prepared. So store up on food. Start storing up, if you haven't already, on real currency, meaning gold and silver. And get prepared, folks. Have a plan B. So that's my 2 cents for the end of the show. Guys, any last comments?
I enjoyed it. Thanks, Darren.
I had a blast. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. I'll be in touch.
Yeah,
all right,
I'd love to have
good,
you on again, Chris. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Whenever you want.
Okay, have a good week, folks. We'll be back on Monday.
Broadcasting to the U.S. and around the world by way of clear digital audio, 22,500 miles above the planet. This is the Global Star Radio Network.